So again, good afternoon and welcome everyone to a special episode of InSight Aviation, where we connect with captains, aviation professionals, air traffic controllers to share their expertise and knowledge about aviation, especially for those of you that are interested in getting into aviation. We are brought to you by Wayman Aviation Academy, located here in South Florida, flying 42 airplanes year-round in sunny South Florida, local and international students directly training for the airlines. So again, I'd like to welcome our guest here is Dr. Orlando Villaverde, the chair of Miami-Dade School of Aviation, a very experienced pilot in many ways, and now in charge of one of the longest running aviation programs that I'm aware of. Going all the way back to the 60s. So welcome, Dr. Villaverde.
Okay, thank you for having me. For me, it's always a pleasure to be here with all of you and your audience. I feel that the aviation industry is obviously on a global scale, is showing a positive trend. There's no question about it, despite the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, it's an industry at value of almost 686 or almost $700 billion. So despite the coronavirus, we can see that air transportation is growing, and this is going to continue beyond 2021. So it is a very important part of our industry, the airline industry, okay, that obviously provides jobs for pilots, flight attendants, operation agents, regional sales manager, flight dispatcher, ground station, etc. So the industry is huge, and we at Miami-Dade College are part of this community, and we serve not only the community itself, but everyone in the South Florida and beyond. And we feel that we have an obligation to our students to make sure that we give them the best and the most top-notch training that we can offer.
And that's a great place to jump off, because Miami-Dade College historically is a community college, although it's greatly outgrown that. And so I'd love for our audience, those of you that are here live in the Zoom channel with us, or maybe you're watching us on Facebook in the comments, let us know where you are. Are you here in Miami? Are you in Florida? Are you sitting in Panama or Peru or Canada, freezing and wanting to come down to Florida? Let us know where you are. And also, your level. Are you a student pilot? Are you a professional pilot? So I'd love to see those two things in the comments from everybody, where you're from and where you are in your training, because towards the end of this conversation, we're going to be able to do some questions and answers, some Q&A, and that really informs us which way to take the conversation. Are we talking to international students? Are we talking to local students? That kind of thing. For example, right now I see somebody from India right off the bat, so that's exciting. So let's start right there. Miami-Dade. You made a great point there. Aviation is a cornerstone industry in Miami-Dade. I recall the head of Miami-Dade Aviation years ago telling me that 1 in 4 jobs in Miami is tied directly to aviation. Tourism, logistics, the international airport. It's just a huge industry here in South Florida. It's a worldwide hub. And of course, the purpose of our local college is to train our local residents to be able to make good paying jobs right here in such a big industry. These things happen, but I'm so glad to have you back.
Okay, sorry about that, Eddie. It's just the internet connection. I probably lost a good couple of minutes. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just talking to everybody how flight training itself is a vocational certification kind of process, and what we love about working with a college is that the students that come from college have a higher level, especially of theory, right? They just have a higher level of theory. So we love hiring graduates from Miami-Dade College, from Embry-Riddle, and from others, because when it comes to teaching ground, you just go deeper, right? You can go deeper. And professionally, if you want to have that job as chief pilot or director of operations, be in the management of an airline organization, that college degree is an important thing on the resume as well. But let's come back to you, Orlando. So the question I was asking when we disconnected there was that the community college's mission really is to help students right here in our community get high-paying jobs in the big industries in our hometown, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And it doesn't get bigger than aviation in Miami, right? It touches everything: tourism, logistics, cargo, the cruise lines, everything comes through Miami International Airport, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how big of an impact does that have in what you do and how you plan the school?
Well, it just like you mentioned, aviation does provide worldwide transportation. There's no question about it. We here in South Florida are at the mecca of the gateways to the Americas. There's no question, and Europe. I mean, let's not forget it. But not even that. It's growing at a bigger proportion. It's the gateway to the world. So because the transportation is an essential for the global business, it generates economic growth. I mean, it basically facilitates trade through tourism, cargo. The transportation logistics is just amazing, and the industry uh, basically supports close to about 63 billion jobs globally. So that's a big number if you think about it.
Yeah.
So we have to actually prepare our future workforce. And the way we're doing it here at Miami-Dade is we're looking at our individual programs to create an apprenticeship and internship programs. So when the students now begin their training, it's not necessarily they're just going to be sitting and receiving all this theoretical knowledge. It's going to be a hybrid approach. And that hybrid approach consists of both theoretical and practical. So, and now in essence, that gives them the ability to not only enter the industry, but be able to now work within the industry early on.
Yeah.
And this is what I did when I was, 18, 17 years old, when I was working, and obtaining my license. I was at that time at Miami-Dade College with a program called the Pilot Entry Program from Eastern Airlines. Eastern Airlines promoted this program very successfully. And the college had two providers, actually had one provider back then. You probably remember Burnside Out.
Yeah,
Okay.
Burnside. Yeah. Our
And
first
then
two airplanes at Wayman Aviation were Burnside Out 152.
there you go. There you go. So one of the things that happened is that led the way to providing now a new life, a new vision in aviation, where not only are you receiving the training inside a classroom, but you're also experiencing this, with the providers. That's why your job and your and Wayman plays a very important role, because what happens now is that the industry now puts you in a situation where the student has no choice but to be able to perform what it's learned in the classroom is now being practiced, okay, in the flight portion, okay, and whether that
Aviation is very
pertains,
much
yeah,
like this. Aviation is very much it's yes, it's a theory, but it's very much a practical career, right? It's something that we're not talking about English literature here. You're gonna go right into using it. No offense to our English literature majors. Hey Orlando, could I have you turn horizontal just for the sake of the video so people can see
yeah,
it better?
okay,
Thank you. Thank you so
perfect,
much.
okay,
Yeah. So that is so important because it is, of course, the mission of the school, right, to deliver jobs, to graduate and to deliver jobs, and that's where we sync the flight provider and the college really sync up here. That our missions to
mm-hmm,
change lives, right? And our
right,
tool, the School of Aviation, and ourselves is the tool of aviation. These beautiful planes, and we get to do it in a beautiful place like Miami.
mm-hmm,
Have you now, in these interviews, we really like to start with the individual. Now, you are the chair of the Miami-Dade College Ike Watson School of Aviation.
that's correct, that's
Okay?
correct, and the School of Aviation has a long history.
Very
I
long.
mean, people, right, 60 years ago. I
Yeah.
mean, aviation in itself has been around since 2000 years. People don't realize that. They felt, oh no, the Wright brothers. No, 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 it's 2000 years. I mean, we're going back to, what we call heavier than air jets. We're looking at the China dating back to hundreds of years. And this is basically began slowly developing. But our school, the A. Watson School of Aviation, which was at that time just basically part of Miami-Dade College in the 1960s, dates back to 1961. The college began in 1960. We began in 1961. So this year is our 60th anniversary that we've been in existence. Okay, and if you think about it, we've been very successful in training uh, the entire aviation industry workforce.
Very
Remember,
much.
we've grown with airlines here in South Florida, like Pan Am, uh, Eastern Airlines, and now American Airlines that plays a very important role in the South Florida area, along with other airlines. Okay, so I'm not trying to exclude the others because there are, there's major airlines, both domestic and international, that plays a very important role here in South Florida, and they are hiring. They are hiring, our future aviation administrators. They are hiring our future transportation logistics personnel. We do have a hub here at Miami International. You know, Companies like DHL, Amazon, Federal Express, they are all within the perimeter of Miami International, as well as Opalaca, okay, that houses Amazon district. So their central headquarters may not be in South Florida, but they definitely have a hub here, okay, for transportation of goods and services.
Absolutely. As you were talking, you made me think. I remember seeing this picture of just 60 years is very impressive, and I remember
Hmm.
seeing this picture of a DC-3, a Miami-Dade College DC-3. So I'm going
Hmm.
to quickly share my screen. It's not the best photo because it's definitely showing its age here, but I was able
Hmm.
to find one of the pictures. So this is definitely on the back end of it, but this is a DC-3 with Miami-Dade Junior College on it. And if we go back, this is Florida Memory, Miami-Dade College student training in that DC-3.
That's correct.
Yeah,
That's correct. And it was called Miami-Dade Junior College
yes.
before it became the Miami-Dade Community College.
Mhm.
And then as it continued to evolve as an institution, then it became Miami-Dade College. Correction, Miami-Dade College in the 1990s, the late 1990s. Okay.
Now, what I love about this, it's such a historic institution here in South Florida, and a lot of people don't realize the impact that aviation has in South Florida, let alone
Hmm.
Miami-Dade College's role there. I don't know, not a week goes by that I don't hear about somebody, an American Airlines captain, former Eastern captains, the former director of Miami International's air traffic control tower, all Miami-Dade College graduates, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
And
So if you look around, most of the alumni that are now either sitting in high paying important jobs around the world globally, most of our airline captains and most of our air traffic controllers, administrators are or were Miami-Dade College students.
yeah, it's really something to be proud of. And we're proud of all of our graduates that have come through Wayman and Miami-Dade College. Um, but I'd love to hear more about you. How is it that you, Orlando Villaverde, came to kind of get interested in aviation? How did that happen?
Well, it's like I mentioned to anyone, you got to have the passion.
Yes.
If you don't have the motivation, you don't have the passion uh, in becoming a industry in the industry. If you don't have that with you, it's not going to happen. So it's got to be embedded into the person. Why do I want to become a pilot, or why do I want to become a mechanic, or why do I want to join the aviation industry? Okay, so there has to be some kind of a passion,
Right.
because aviation in itself, it's not easily digested. Okay, it's not easily digested. You have to like it from within. So
Yeah.
if you basically have that passion, which I did, then from very early in your career, you're definitely going to be you're always going to be involved in the aviation industry. And that's exactly what happened to me. I wanted to become a pilot. I felt that early on in my life, this is what I wanted to do. Just being part of this industry is a passion that was just bringing me towards it. And I did. One of the things I did as soon as I finished my high school is, I joined Miami-Dade College. And the college had its program, which obviously, like we have today, it obviously facilitated me because I was able to join the pilot entry program early on. I was able to meet very important individuals that work in the industry, and that's what one of the things that we try to have with our internship and apprenticeship program. Individuals that are now working in the industry that can tell you exactly what's happening. Okay,
So
so
did you
if they
have?
can give you, yeah.
Sorry. So did you have? So little Orlando, going way back. Did you have like friends, family, anybody that was in the world of aviation?
Not necessarily. My family came from a medical field,
Really?
but they were role models. You
Mhm.
know, aviation role models, professors, friends that were involved in the industry, and that in itself created that attachment. You know, and it magnetized me to enter the industry from one way of another. And the moment I opened, you know, my mentality into saying, hey, wait a minute, this is what I wanted to do. As soon as I was able to basically what we call rediscover what flight is all about, then I became completely uh, amazed with aviation, and I began to now become part of the industry. So technically, it is a mindset. You know, you have to have that passion. You know,
So
and that attraction has to be within.
so you joined the Eastern Airlines pilot entry program.
Mhm.
How does that? I'm kind of curious how that differs from what we're doing now, right? I know you don't have that direct airline partnership, but for example, through your flight training partners, Wayman Aviation, you have Republic and SkyWest and Silver, all of whom fly out of Miami International and Fort Lauderdale. For those of you that don't recognize those names, um, SkyWest and Republic fly for American Airlines, United, Delta. Those are the regionals, right? So we still have that flow through program going on. But how does the program from back when you first experienced it as a student? That's kind of amazing. You were there as a student, now you're the chair. How does that differ from what you see today?
Well, it differs very little, and I'll tell you why. Because the airlines were, I mean, back then we had Eastern Airlines that was part of South Florida. Now we have other airlines that may not be associated or affiliated with the South Florida region. In other words, they may be located in other areas around the United States or around the globe. But nevertheless, with technology, it brings everybody together. You know, so we still have that connection. And what the beauty of it all is that the college had that those affiliation. They were well ingrained in working with members of the industry, and the same thing that we have here today. And these are one of the things that we try to promote for our students to understand that there is a connection between the college, okay, or the educational institution providing the training and the industry itself. And we don't
Absolutely.
have to go that far. We don't have to go that far. We have these airlines operating, you know, at Miami International and in other parts of the nation. So we have offices that we have contact with. We have members of those organizations that come to our classroom. You know, I mean, obviously with COVID-19, things change because everything has to be done through the internet now. But you know, at one point or another, I remember very clearly that you know you have members of these airlines coming in and petitioning our students to apply.
Very
You know,
nice.
even if it's just an internship program, but at least you begin to develop that relationship, and that's exactly what we want.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So you went through that pilot entry program, but at some point, if I understand correctly, you kind of took a detour because you became a public servant. Is that right?
Right. What happened is the goal was to finish your commercial license and then get hired.
Right.
And at that time, I was hired by Pan Am. I
Nice.
was working with Pan Am, and unfortunately, Pan Am was basically on the brink of Chapter 7 because that was during the deregulated era
Right.
of the 1980s, and then by 1989 or 1990, the company folded. So I found myself with certain options, and one of those options was, hey, do I continue, you know, applying, or do I continue, you know, looking at other options within the airline industry, which unfortunately at that time it was very difficult, you know, to get hired as a low time pilot, or do I look at other possibilities? And one of those options is a friend of mine who was the chief pilot of at that time, the Miami-Dade Air Rescue, and he was the chief pilot of the Miami Police Aviation Department. Asked me to go ahead. Hey, listen, why don't you apply? You do have certain credentials, even though I was not a rotary pilot. I was basically a fixed wing.
Really?
So
So you
so
applied
I
as
ended up
a pilot for a rotary job.
I ended up applying. I had to go through the academy. I became a police officer. Okay. And then, I during that time period, I started working towards my rotary or my rotorcraft helicopter license, which I did, and I was able to obtain my commercial, and I continue in obtaining my certified flying instructor. So I was able to now open my career in a different area altogether, in the public sector as opposed to the private sector. And for me, it was like very well nourished. I was extremely or graciously accepted this position, and I grew within the organization, just like any other organization. You know,
That's excellent. That's excellent. Now, I imagine the demands are very different, right? Because I feel like the I mean it's a lot of people are so focused on the airlines, right? That's what they want to do that they kind of miss it. There's a lot of aviation out there, and
absolutely, absolutely. And what you need to know is what will be the best option for you, for the person. You know, if your idea is, okay, I want to get a job in the airline industry, but hey, it doesn't have to be passenger travel. It could be cargo if you want to. Cargo operators are very, very, satisfying job,
right,
well paid. And we have a lot of cargo operators worldwide. Okay, so that's one area. That's in the private sector. The public sector is a whole different world that individuals do not understand. And I try to open up people's minds, saying, hey, listen, the public sector is hiring. Whether you're working for the state, whether you're working for the county, or whether you're working for the federal government, they are high paid, you know, flying careers within the public sector,
yeah.
aside from the private sector. So
I met a
this is
young
something
gentleman.
that you may want to evolve yourself and
Yeah.
tell your audience that they do have options.
Yeah, I met a young gentleman. I want to say he was a graduate of Miami-Dade College, and he was working for the federal wildlife, right? Flying over the Everglades, flying over the Keys, keeping an eye, I guess,
Hmm.
on fires and things like that. And it's something that just hadn't it never occurred to me. But yeah, there's all sorts of flying out there, and especially in the last 5 years, everyone was so airline oriented because they were hiring, anybody with a certificate and a pulse, and bringing them up to speed. But you kind of stumbled there onto one of the things I really want to talk about, which is that aviation is very cyclical, right? You train, you have the best intentions, you're prepared, you even get hired like you did at Pan Am, and then the bottom drops out. And we're in one of
Right.
those moments. We have been this last year, right? Um, I imagine now in your career, you've probably seen, by my count, probably at least three of those kind of dips in the aviation industry. Um, what was that experience like, and what advice would you give to those students that were there? They were either they're in the pipe right now, they're about to get their commercial, or they had their commercial and they're ready to apply, and they're in like this holding pattern. What are your thoughts?
Right. Well, the biggest disruption is what happened last year. Because we were basically involved in a mass hiring. A lot of our pilots and graduates were getting hired. There's no question about it. The industry was enormously growing. There were airline jobs, and the airlines themselves, specifically, the low cost carriers were expanding enormously. Carriers like JetBlue, Southwest, and others. So being affiliated, or at least going through the pipeline, uh, does give the ability for the student to continue, and they feel hey, wait a minute, I do have a good chance with just about 1,000 or 1,500 hours, or if I get my ATP restricted with 1,250, I have a very good chance of getting higher. And they did, things that didn't happen in the past. Unfortunately, the pandemic did stop and slow down the hiring. Most of these airlines had to stop operation immediately. And as we can see, this basically changed the trend going forward, and the airline industry began to show a slowdown, which obviously continue until September. But what we've seen, the numbers actually started going up now.
Oh yeah.
We've seen an expansion of carriers. Those pilots that were laid off, they're being rehired. The industry, and one thing students don't understand is that during the time period of the pandemic, what do you think the major airlines did? They gave options to their senior pilots.
It's
And
true.
I'll give you a perfect story, and this won't take long. A captain that I know personally, I'm not going to say who it is because it's not fair, but this captain, who was basically earning not only six figure, but more like a quadruple figure of salary, was because they ended up laying off the junior officers. So they had no choice but to bring him back and allow him to work multiple overtime. So
Oh yeah.
he quadrupled his salary in
Wow.
1 year. While some of his friends that were senior, they retired. So
Mhm.
what's happening now is, guess what? Unless he leaves, there's what? There's a need for new pilots. So
Absolutely.
now, so now these carriers are now hiring new pilots because they have to fulfill these jobs. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. Prior to the pandemic, I mean, there was the pilot shortage, the much famed pilot shortage, and that hasn't gone away. There's been a pause, right? We paused. 2020 was a big pause, like they call it the Great Pause, right?
hmm
But you're right. The airline retirements, the captain retirements, is really what was pushing that pilot shortage, and it's accelerated. American Airlines, I believe, had early retirement on 740 pilots. That's just one of the big three, right?
hmm
So you multiply that, and then around the world, we've had. I was just talking to a gentleman in Colombia who was telling me about the mass early retirements at Avianca as well. And so
hmm
uh, when things come back around, and they absolutely are, the latest numbers I heard from Delta was that domestic travel was back up to 70%. And
right.
international travel, of course, is lagging because this country's opening, that country's closing, quarantines, and things like that. I really think that'll stabilize by the summer. But the fact that domestic travel is back up to 70%, then that's well on the road to that U-shaped recovery we were all talking about last year.
Right. Well, it is, and I'll give you more data on this. The aviation industry right now is expecting around 30,000 new pilots. So 2021 is expecting 30,000. Over the next decade, we're looking at almost a quarter and a quarter and a half of new pilots.
Yeah,
So you can see, and that's only because of fulfilling the gap that exists.
right.
That's not including the growth of air transportation as a whole.
Mhm.
Air transportation as a whole is going to require more pilots. Remember this: before 1978, before the deregulated era, what happened? We only had two flag carriers, Pan Am and TWA.
Okay.
Okay, ever since that, ever since those times, things have changed around the world,
Oh yeah.
because airlines around the world now have their own airlines, and I'm not talking about airlines. Now they have multiple airlines for a country.
Sure.
Okay, so the carriers themselves are not dependent on what it was back in the days of the 1960s and 70s, where the U.S. carriers usually flew to all these international cities. It's now the other way around. Even though the American airline industry is huge, there's no question about it. Okay, the worldwide industry is even bigger. You
That's
know, so now this is allowing the industry to continue growing. Okay, and it will.
So what I'm seeing is, because we've seen several of these trends. When we had the economic crash in 2008, 9/11, of course, was a tough one for the industry as a whole. Um, is to be prepared for that comeback, because aviation is cyclical. This is not the first, and definitely not the last downturn we'll ever see,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's all about being prepared and timing, right? So
Right.
if the timing isn't right for you, don't uh, don't sit it out, right? Don't just sit on your mom's couch and wait for it
Mm-hmm.
to come back around. My big thing that I'm telling all the students is, first of all, if you truly love it, you can't do anything else, right? You got to keep flying, keep
Hmm.
training, getting that next certification, right? If you just got your CFI, go for the double I. If you just got a double I, go for your MEI, right? If you got furloughed, visit your local airport, volunteer, do Young Eagles flights, whatever it
Hmm.
is, to keep yourself current, because that swing back is going to happen a lot sooner than you think.
Right, right. And Eddie, just to let you know, just to let your audience know that at least Miami-Dade College is prepared, to basically write out what we call the perfect storm in pilot shortage. There's no question about it.
Oh yeah.
We're looking at 30,000 uh, pilots within 2021. We're looking at almost a quarter and a half more pilots that we need to hire, for the next 10 years. There's This is the best opportunity, and this is the time for students to get their license, and obviously to continue upgrading their skills. One of the things that we did here at the college is we hired retired captains. We have a United retired captain, and he is teaching our 141 certificate program. We've also hired, our previous flight operators and administrators from airlines in the past, and we are allowing these new adjuncts and these new professors to bring a new component into the industry. And the one thing that we're doing is we're also looking internally at our individual programs to make changes to meet the industry demand. There's no question about it. There is an industry demand. Technology is changing, right? So guess what? We have to train our 21st century pilot to be able to cope with that technology. Okay. So those are all things that are playing a vital role here going forward. And let's not forget also that the airline industry is not composed of just the airline. We're looking at air charters,
Oh, absolutely.
okay, all
Charter
right,
is huge.
cargo operators, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So there are other components to the industry itself.
Absolutely. So let's bring it back to you and Miami-Dade College, right? So you had a successful career as a public servant, flying Miami. Was it Miami-Dade County, Miami-Dade City Police helicopter?
I flew all kinds of helicopters,
Come on.
but most turbine helicopters, both pistons and turbine. And one of the things that I was able to successfully acquire is looking at the police operation itself. Okay, or what we call the operations from the public sector mindset. So even though it worked normally, identical to an aviation or an airline component, it was somewhat different because your customer is basically the public, where in the airline industry, the customers are basically the paying customers, the one that are basically you're traveling from point A to point B. Okay. But what I ended up doing is I continue my education. And that's one of the things that I always uh, ex- tell every student, that your education does not end when you obtain your license. It
Sure.
doesn't end when you obtain your degree. You want to continue obtaining your other degrees. So one of the things that the college has done is we've developed articulation agreement with other universities, okay, and other industries for the purposes of those students that they want to continue their training into the vocational field. They can do that. If they want to continue in obtaining their baccalaureate degree and master's degree, okay, they can also continue. Okay.
And you very much so continued. So during your tenure as a police helo pilot, you pursued your PhD. Is that right?
Right, right. I went up through the rank, through the department. I worked in different areas within obviously the operations side, but also the administration side. I continue upgrading my skills by obtaining my master's degree and my doctoral degree. And the biggest the biggest satisfaction is working with professionals within the industry. I think that's where you learn the most. You can see how you're right when you're working with professionals within the industry. learn so many things, so many new things. And then you can actually analyze the fact that, hey, the industry may not be the way you saw it several years ago. It is constantly changing, you know? And I would imagine your audience understands that, okay? That it is constantly changing.
Absolutely. I had an MBA professor tell me once, if you're doing whatever, if you're doing the same thing you're doing 5 years ago, you're doing it wrong.
That's correct.
Because things change. Absolutely, right? And so it
That's
was
correct.
so you're kind of in the perfect place. Here you are with a career of aviation experience of service in the public sphere where you know how public institutions work, and you brought that to Miami-Dade College. Now you joined Miami-Dade College, if I recall, was it early in 2020?
No, actually, I joined the college as an adjunct back in 2000.
Oh, correct. Yes.
Okay, so I was still working uh, in the aviation department, and I was working still with the city, but at the same token, I was still teaching. So I
Yes.
began teaching in order to, and the whole purpose was, hey, I wanted to see what academia was all about. I just didn't want to disassociate myself, and I felt that I had to give something back to the community. So giving something back to the community is helping your fellow pilots and your fellow aviators. So I was able to connect during that time period, and it was well taken at that time, and I felt that that was something that helped me a lot.
That's one of the things that I love about Miami-Dade College, where your professors are not just pure teachers, but they're working in the field that they're teaching in. Like yourselves, or like Professor Tim Schmelter, who is a pilot examiner as well as teaching at
Mm-hmm.
Miami-Dade College. I think it's a wonderful thing. And when you're a student, you're getting real world experience, not just somebody reading the textbook. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about the Miami-Dade College program. And you've got many branches, but what we really want to talk about is your professional pilot technology degree. That's your degree for pilots, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
And the big question that I get when a student walks into us at Opelika Airport, which is where most of our Miami-Dade College students are, we have a great little facility there. You walk in, and this 19, 20-year-old student wants to know, like, why should I go to Miami-Dade College, versus learning with Joe instructor that's renting a 172. What do you think of something like that?
Well, number one, formal education. I think we can take it to a different level. That that the instructors who are teaching here at the college do have a combination of not only the degrees but also the experience. And I'll give you an example of one of my distinguished professors, Alan Rossmore. And Dr. Rossmore comes from a background, a very extensive background of not only as an attorney, but also the director of flight operation at Eastern Airlines.
Wow.
So he brings a lot of experience into the classroom. Yeah, he used to be a faculty member of the college, and now he's continued to teach with us as an adjunct. That's one of the biggest example of our what we call an experienced professor who does have the formal education, who does have the multiple degrees, and has, aside from that, the ability to teach, and has done it very successfully. In the case of Captain James Williams, Captain Williams is a retired captain from United Airlines. He also flew F-14 in the Air Force, and he was a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. So, not only are we looking at the industry itself, but also the multiple degrees that he has, plus the airline experience. So that makes him a very well-versed individual in the industry. In the case of Victor Fernandez, Professor Fernandez, it was an air traffic controller for almost 20, 24, 25 years before he retired, and his education, formal education plus his experience, he was able to bring that into the classroom. So he's been able to teach our air traffic control students. So as you can see, we have instructors, with a wealth of information. And I think that's the reason why the students, I'd rather go to the college, and receive this, this enormous amount of information, an enormous amount of wealth of knowledge, okay, then unfortunately going to, an individual who probably does have the licensing. I'm not saying he doesn't, but you know, again, do you want to actually limit yourself to just basically becoming a pilot, or do you want to be basically a leader within the industry? And that's exactly what we're trying to develop here. We're not trying to develop just a captain, but we're trying to develop a well-versed individual that is able to, in the case of Maslow hierarchy of needs, he's able to continuously grow and continues to become what we call self-actualization. Okay.
As one very formidable faculty and staff that are teaching Miami-Dade College, there are really two things come to mind for myself when I'm talking to a local student that comes in. One is by working with Miami-Dade College, a registered school that gives you an aviation degree, you get the restricted ATP at 1,250 hours instead of 1,500 hours. That's something the FAA feels that the college education is important enough that they will reduce their ATP minimums for you. Right, so that's
correct. That's a great asset, and I can give you others. Not necessarily just the degree itself that allows you that once you finish, now you're halfway through your baccalaureate degree. Okay, so the moment you finish your AS degree, your 4-year degree is just a step away because you've already done most of it here at the college. But also the ability to get or obtain a restricted ATP, the ability to obtain or basically apply for scholarship. We understand how expensive it is. Yeah, that's an expensive proposition. So we do have those ability to provide you with a scholarship option. And the beauty of it all, that we're basically now entering this new trend, is internship and apprenticeship, where the student can now work in the industry as they're basically obtaining their education.
Let's do a little. Let's spend a moment there, a little holding pattern around scholarships, because I have to say that is probably the number one thing for a local student, somebody right here in Miami, in Hialeah, in Kendall, who wants to be a pilot. Mom and dad work hard every single day, but it's not cheap, right? You're gonna expend as much on your flight training education as you would spend at a general 4-year private school, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
The fact that Miami-Dade College has, I believe, 3 scholarships at this point that their students regularly have access to is huge,
yes.
Right? Where else, if you came to me, I can't really help you too much, right? But the school, through its 60 years, through its connections in the community, has money to help you learn how to fly, right?
That's correct.
You take us through those 3 scholarships.
Well, the first one is the 8 Watson scholarships, okay, which is obviously was established back in 88, 89 with Lois and Harvey Watson. Okay, they were generous enough to start a scholarship with the Miami-Dade College. That's why we were able to rename our school the A. Watson School of Aviation. Okay, and their scholarship is huge because we've been offering between $7,000 and $8,000 per student, just that single scholarship. We also have the Timothy E. Johnson Scholarship, which is obviously ranges between $7,000 and $10,000 per student. Okay, so in essence, those are huge scholarships that can take you through your first certification licensing, which is your private. Okay, we also have GMAA, which is another scholarship.
Greater Miami Aviation Association.
Greater Miami Aviation Association. Okay, and we're also affiliated with other scholarships to include AOPA, Women's in Aviation and others. So we're basically trying to position ourselves that we can provide all these scholarships to our students.
I can't tell you how many students I've spoken to that say, "Oh, I'll never get it. There must be 1,000 people fighting for these scholarships." And the AOPA one, for example, is a national scholarship. You might actually have several, 1,000 people, several hundred people fighting for it. But the I. Watson scholarship, the Timothy Johnson scholarship, the GMAA scholarship, I feel like in years past, I've even been told that not enough people apply, right? Usually you need to have decent grades, not straight A's, but decent grades, and do a 1-page essay. I mean, if you can get yourself to write a 1-page essay and someone will give you $7,000, I don't know how many hundreds of dollars per hour that is.
That's correct. That's correct. And you know what? If you think about it, one of the things that we're also doing is we are realigning and restructuring our flap fee for our flight courses. That's one of the things that we put forth. And we want to develop also payment plans for our students. We want to give them the ability to uh, pay these courses and facilitate them in paying for the courses. So
Yeah,
it's either through a payment plan, it's either through a scholarships. Hopefully, we'll also be able to allow to provide them with loans that they can utilize very effectively. And even though a loan may be say, well, you still have to pay it back, but look at the big picture. You're going to be able to finish your career. You're going to be able to actually begin to earn money. And, I remember education is priceless. If
absolutely.
anything you want to invest that you're always going to get money in return is education. There's
That's
no
the biggest
question
return on
about
investment.
it.
Yeah, biggest return on
Right,
investment.
right.
Now,
It is better than the stock market. Okay.
absolutely. Now,
Yeah, you don't have to pay taxes after that. A 401k, you can make a lot of money, but at the end you have to pay taxes. Education is constantly giving you back revenue.
absolutely. So we're kind of getting to the end of our hour, but as I'm looking at the chat and the questions that we've seen here, what I'm noting is that we have people from around the world, India, Bahamas, Turkey, and Peru. And one thing you point out there is about work, right? This turns around and turns into work. And for our international students, they're looking to join Miami-Dade College. One of the beauties of being an international student at Miami-Dade College in the pilot program is that you can pursue being a flight instructor. You get credit for being a flight instructor at Miami-Dade College, and you can work as an international student on what's called OPT, Occupational Practical Training, right?
Hmm.
Or even if you're with us, you can actually work on campus because we're part of Miami-Dade College's campus to some extent. So
Right.
this is something that's often overlooked, but it's kind of everyone's dream, right? To if you grew up in Peru or wherever, to come to the U.S., get a degree, work in the U.S. of A. Live here for it's 2 years for the degree and then a year of OPT, and then you can go back home to Peru, to India, to Turkey, wherever it might be, now as a licensed pilot with
Hmm.
a college degree and 1,000 or more hours of experience, right?
That.
That's a huge thing. I know that in this building alone, I think right now we have 6 Miami-Dade College instructors that are international students, and
Mhm.
I know every one of them is so grateful for that opportunity. Um,
Right.
that's something you find success with at Miami-Dade College, having international students.
Absolutely. And those are the things that we are welcoming right now. We do have basically, and as you're pretty much aware, we have two providers, yourself and ADF at Miami Executive. And one of the things we're going to be doing aggressively is making sure that both you and ADF have the ability to hire and bring these internship programs so we can hire our students. There's no question about it. I think that's the path to success in growing our programs. There's no question about it that Miami-Dade does have to play and take that leading role along with Wayman and ADF for purposes of working collectively for the purposes of promoting these programs. And one of the things that you've done very successfully for Wayman Aviation is that yes, you have hired Miami-Dade instructors and Miami-Dade students, and I think that's going to be a success going forward. Okay. The other thing that we want to do is market ourselves, okay, with Wayman in the international market. So we can basically show that there's a market in the United States for the international students, and we can definitely capitalize on that process.
Yeah, it's something, Miami-Dade College is at its core a community college serving the people here in South Florida in Miami-Dade. But Miami is an international capital, right? So
That's
it's
correct.
almost by default an international school. I believe I was talking to your PDSO. The PDSO is the person in charge of student visas, and she was
Hmm.
telling me something like almost not quite half, but a significant portion of Miami-Dade College students are actually international students.
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
correct. And we want to make sure that we can facilitate these international students from the moment they walk into our office or the moment they walk into your office, that they understand that we're working with them in order to facilitate them from from the beginning of their training all the way to the end, in being able to provide them, facilitate them, take care of them, and give them all the tools to succeed. Okay. And let them know that we have the logistics in place. We have the capability to enroll these students, and we have done it successfully. Our track record does pretty much say that we have not only grown within the community, but we're basically becoming known around the world. And that's the key component in allowing the international students to put their trust in Miami-Dade and Wayman.
Absolutely. So if students are interested in that Miami-Dade College Wayman program, you can visit wayman.edu/college. And I believe for the Miami-Dade School of Aviation, it must be very similar, like mdc.edu/.
mdc.edu, you could probably put the website for the 8 Watson School of Scholarship. There is an email that they can immediately send their request. Once they send their request, we will set them up with an advisor. We do have a specific program manager that deals with a professional pilot. Okay, so there's going to be somebody who's going to be talking to you, and definitely we will begin the process of enrolling these students for our future classes. Okay.
And for anyone that wants to pursue Miami-Dade College, I can't emphasize how important it is to talk to that School of Aviation counselor, because Miami-Dade College, I want to say, is might be the single largest community college in the country.
No, right? We are the biggest in the world.
In the world?
Wow. Yeah, definitely. College. Yeah, and we are the biggest. There's no question about it that we have grown to the point that we have so many programs. It's enormous. However, when it comes to the School of Aviation, we are a very organized and close-knit society. Okay, so we are able to take our students and definitely give them that one-on-one, attention that they need, and so they desperately want, because aviation is so complex. There's so much information about aviation that you want to ask all these questions, but we do have the qualified staff and personnel to be able to answer all those questions.
That's a good point. Okay. Aviation is, I always say, aviation training is such a winding road. Joining something like Miami-Dade College gives you access to great mentorship, great guidance. They have guidance counselors, as part of the staff to help you get there, right?
Excellent.
Because oftentimes we're kind of hacking our way through the forest, and here's a school that has had the way paved for the last 60 years, right? So we're coming to the end of our time. I've got to congratulate you for joining Miami-Dade College now as a new chairman for the bright future of Miami-Dade College and the 60-year anniversary. Is there anything you'd like to share with the audience, how to contact you, things like that?
Well, what I like to tell the audience is thank you very much for the attention you have given us. Okay, just be aware that the new image of the School of Aviation is teamwork. We're here. Teamwork. We're here collectively working with Wayman and our providers for the purposes of servicing our students. Okay, so we do welcome each and every one of you, and please call us, let us know, so we can set up a one-on-one session with you. Okay, we also have internet capability, so it's not like before where this is just a phone call away. No, we can set up a Teams meeting, we can set up a Zoom meeting, okay, and we can do all the paperwork even though from the comfort of your home. So we're trying to bring that connection to everyone's needs. Okay,
absolutely. Thank you so much. Miami-Dade College's summer semester starts now in May, so fire up your applications. Classes are happening online. Maybe they'll be back in person for summer or for fall. I don't know.
Right. I would suggest everybody to just log in into mdc.edu, fill in your application immediately. Just by filling out your application does not mean you have to join right away, but at least we can get the ball rolling. We can get the ball process. Call us, let us know. We can definitely set up a Teams meeting or a Zoom session. And with that said, you can also see and come to our facility. We have personnel on site, obviously maintaining social distancing and protection because we're still under the pandemic, but we can give you a tour of the facility without a doubt. Okay.
Absolutely.
Whether it's the Homestead campus, the Miami International, or Miami Executive, we are available.
Absolutely. And of course, visit wayman.edu/college. If you already have a license in your country, you want to convalidate it to the US, continue with your CFI, get that job opportunity, build some flight time while we're in the middle of this international mess. Reach out to us and let's see if you can take that next step with Miami-Dade College and Wayman Aviation.
Thank you, Eddie.
Dr. Lendo Villaverde, pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.